So, this story happened yesterday in the parking spot of a local store. I was hanging around with my best friend when we agreed to drive around a bit. I asked my father what car I should pick. He let me drive his 2021 G-Wagon. I hope the correct English name for the E-Classe is worth about 54,000 euros. I'm a good driver. So, we began driving around a bit when both of us got a bit hungry, so we drove to a local store to get something to eat. When we returned to the car and sat in the trunk of the car, when I saw a woman behind us getting her 3 kids out of the car. Then I saw her coming over to me following a conversation. She only spoke English. Excuse me? Me. Can I help you? EM. Where did you get a car like that? Me. I didn't. My father just lets me use it sometimes. EM. And why would your father let you drive his car? Me. Because I'm his son and a good driver? EM. No, you're lying. This isn't your car. Me. Using the keys to unlock and lock the car to prove that this is indeed my car, but she didn't seem to care if it was my car or not. EM. I still don't believe you. I'm sure you're a drug dealer and made the money for that car by ruining people's lives. Me to my friend. What's your problem? My friend. I don't know, let's just go. EM. What did you say to your friend? Me. Just asking something about school. EM. You know that it is very rude to talk another language when other people are around you. Made me feel uncomfortable with your NZ words. Still can't believe she said that. Me. Now, why would it, and don't call German an NZ language? EM. Why shouldn't I call it that? What it is, huh? Why shouldn't I call it what it is? Me. Because it isn't, EM. Finally getting to her point. You don't deserve a car like that. You don't need it. I have 3 kids. We need a big car. I looked over to her car, an SUV, and I can't remember which one. Me. Ma'am, again, this isn't my car. It's my father's, and I am driving it. EM. I don't care. Give me the key. We need that car more than you do. Me. No, I won't. Why would my dad work really hard so he can afford that car? EM. Stop lying about this car being your father's. It's yours and I know you're a drug dealer. Me to my friend. Yeah, let's just leave. She's annoying. EM. To talk NZ language when I'm around? Me. You're in Germany and you can expect people to speak German here. EM. Not when I'm around. Me. Whatever. Me and my friend just stood up and closed the trunk, and for one split second you could see my brother's sport bag in the trunk. EM. So that is where you're hiding your drugs. I ignore her and just proceed to enter the car. EM. I'm gonna call the cops on you. You won't sell your drugs any longer. We just drove away, and you thought this whole thing was over, but then when we were almost home, a police car stopped us. An officer came to my window and told me that this car had been reported as stolen and that there were drugs in a bag in the trunk. So I showed him my driver's license and the vehicle papers, which confirmed that this was indeed my dad's car. Next, the cop wanted to see inside the trunk, so I showed him and also showed him my brother's sports bag. The cop told us that he sees no reason to keep us here and that we could continue our trip, and so told us that he would solve the problem with the stolen and drug report. Still can't believe this EM wanted me to give her the key to 2-month-old 50,000 euro worth car only because I don't deserve this car and because she needs the car more than I do and actually call the cops on me. Next story. So I've had the suspicion for a while that my parents may be hiding cameras in my room, and I confronted my mother about it today. I asked her, plainly with little to no emotion, "Did you put a camera in my room?" or something to that effect, and her immediate response was this: not why, but A, if I found it, and B, where it was. Context: she has threatened suicide, murdering my father, running away, taking some or all or none of the kids with her multiple times in the past. She has had multiple relationships outside of her marriage to my father, texting them online and sending nudes/sexting in my sister's bed when she was at university. She illustrates a great number of narcissistic personality traits and behaviors, and my siblings and I have come to the consensus that she most likely is. Her mother is a textbook narcissist also, and her family have a big history of assault, mental disorders, psychological, physical, and emotional abuse. My father seemed somewhat well-adjusted, but with little to no emotions other than happy, jokey, and angry. constantly fought with my mother, but has since completely turned and now is seemingly wholly on her side. He now behaves substantially similarly to my mother and her narc tendencies, and after looking back at my relationship with him, during conflict he also seems to invalidate, gaslight, and psychologically, hesitant to say abuse, something to me as well. For context, he did in the past admit and support the view that she was and is a narcissist, but has now since changed it to, she has a mean streak, yes, she likes to be the center of attention, yes, she's very loud and rude, yes, but excuse, so I don't know anymore. Now, maybe I'm hyper paranoid and suspicious, but the fact that her innate automatic response wasn't an overtly emotional one of hurt, confusion, of anger, but a very impatient and tense, where did you find it then, and asking if I ever found one over why I would question, sent me on high alert. She then proceeded to ask me why, but only after asking where and if I found one. She kept asking those two questions. In addition, she then started texting substantial amounts of texts on her phone to someone, most likely my father, and her body language shifted a bunch. Alongside this, she asked, well, where would these cameras be? Which made me super anxious as I only said one camera. She mentioned two, like that was the starting context. So then it seemed like there was a camera, in fact more than one in there, and she'd let it slip, so that's cool. She was confused, then tense, then, which was really strange, started trying to play nice with me. She tried to make some chill jokes, she started making plain non-confrontational conversation, unlike her at all. She made a few quiet, chill, but pointed remarks about me and what I'd done, which had violated something similar, although not to that extent and for a different reason in the past, and intimated how it must be a projection and what was I doing in there to make me ask. She kept trying to be normal, but when cooking on the stove she turned her back and put one hand on her temple, which is a common sign of embarrassment, guilt, or shame, and looked extremely tense, had her brows furrowed after, no overt emotion, no sadness, just a tense look, which freaked me out on the inside completely. My father then came down and said he was amused that it was even a thing I'd consider. He also said that whatever I was thinking wasn't grounded in reality and reacted defensively over asking why also. He was more pissed and amused, patronizing over any other emotion, and they both seemed super off to me. They kept sharing looks and my mother seemed to have her lying face on, so now I feel creeped out. My mother kept trying to make out like I was being overly paranoid, but considering the past and context, I don't know anymore. So tell me, am I crazy? There are easy ways to detect small cameras. Many people have uploaded how-to videos to YouTube. Camera spying is a big issue in South Korea apparently, and is becoming somewhat of a concern at Airbnbs in the West. If I were you, I'd actually look for the cameras, since she seems to want to know if you found one and where it was. Which sounds like her asking, which camera did you find? More than a denial of any sort. If you find any, you can remove them or confront your parents with the evidence. If they aren't the ones doing it, they should be concerned that you found a camera, so if they deny being the ones putting them out, tell them you're going to sell the cameras to make some of the money, to make back some of the emotional damage being spied on would incur. Well, if it wasn't you guys, I don't have any clue who would spy on me. Can't sue them for damages, so I guess I'll pawn these. Sounds suspicious to me. The cameras slip, her trying to sidestep the question, texting your father, him coming down and defending her. He's brought into her narrative. It was a defensive measure, but he's fallen too far into it to garner much sympathy from me. There are ways to check even if you don't have a scanner. The bright LED flashlight on the back of your phone is a good one. Hold the light super close to any clear surface, mirror, glass face of a clock, etc., and anything providing USB power, anything plugged in. The camera lens should be visible, and if it's a pinhole, will reflect bluish light. Try turning everything slightly wrong. 45 degrees won't make much of a difference to how it looks from your perspective, but would totally ruin a camera's point of focus. Then see what mysteriously gets pointed back where it was. Sorry your parents are like this. OP, check all plugs, plug sockets, light fittings, fixtures, curtain poles, smoke alarms, etc. Good way to tell if something has a camera lens is to turn off the light so it's dark and slowly pass your phone light across the front of them. If there's a lens, you will see the light reflected. Saw all these on a video about hidden spy cameras hidden in Airbnbs. Next story. Many years ago, I worked for a rather large chain adult bookstore in northern Ohio. Not a terrible job, pay wasn't the best, but at least they would work with you to a point on scheduling. This part is important later. While working there, E was an employee that had been there shortly before I was hired. They were an older gentleman and very gay. Very entitled and arrogant, and flaunted himself being gay made him better and smarter than everyone else. He had a lot of cool stories from when he lived in San Francisco, though not sure why someone would ever give up a rent-controlled apartment to move to Ohio. Think his entitlement stemmed from the fact that he used to hang out with the big music and acting crowds from those days. Tons of amazing memorabilia signed by musicians and artists, a bunch of recordings from small shows, etc. Imagine instead of Rose from Golden Girls going back in St. Olaf, it was back in San Francisco, but with a whole lot of sneer and entitlement. So they were hired on as a second shift worker with the occasional overnight or morning shift. Then began the ass kissing with every manager in the store over the years. Honestly, I was surprised that his nose wasn't stained brown from how much ass he kissed. This goes on for some time. Anytime we get a new manager, tells them that when they look at his schedule, it's a mistake and he should be on the morning shift. So instead of rotating out like the rest of us for the overnights or evening shifts, the brown-nosed his way into mornings most of the time. The whole time his attitude and entitlement is just growing since he keeps managers wrapped around his finger, avoiding dealing with customers, finding everything else to do other than his job really. This goes on until we get a manager that sees through his crap. They start making the schedules fair again. This doesn't sit well with our resident queen, and they start complaining, and any time they have to work the evening shift, disappearing to make it so they don't really need to work with the other people. The manager ignored his grumblings, kept rotating the schedule like it wasn't supposed to be done. Then the person actually wrote a note explaining that it wasn't fair to them to have to work a rotating schedule like everyone else, that they were needed on the morning shift and they couldn't physically handle working late nights and getting up for the morning shift once in a blue moon, when the schedule would fall that way. Regardless, he only worked it maybe once a month compared to everyone else doing it 4 to 5 times in the same period. The only reason he wasn't moved to another store was pretty much none of the other managers who met him wanted to work with him or deal with his brown nosing. He thought it was perfectly fine getting the single mother working at the store to work the evening shifts by lying to a manager saying that's when they prefer to work, instead of them seeing their kids on a regular basis or that they were hired for a primary morning shift. This might have been okay with them during the morning shift if they were a good salesman or something, but they were absolutely terrible at trying to sell the adult products to anyone and didn't want to learn about the things we sold in the store to be able to answer questions about them. The person felt so entitled not just at work but outside of work as well. They felt that since they paid taxes, they should be able to walk in the street if they felt like it, and that cars needed to make exceptions for him, not the other way around. They also couldn't seem to grasp the fact that if you're going to walk around during the summer in a pair of shorts short enough to make Rickard Simmons blush and a sleeveless workout shirt, that people are going to call you names when you're doing a very fast power walk that looks like you're trying to hold up something in your butt cheeks. Next story. Hi, I'm a 20-year-old nurse. I work full-time and I'm going to school full-time. The entitled parent of the story is a mother who has a child with a disability. This child has a feeding tube and a bunch of medication. He's also nonverbal and very picky. I receive a text message from this mother because she's planning a vacation with her husband. The night nurse that was supposed to work called off with COVID. Entitled mother asked if I would be able to work 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. for them to have the night coverage. I said I would think about it and get back to them. A few days later, I messaged them saying I would be willing to help. I work a normal day shift job and said for me to be able to help, I would need to be able to get some sleep. The child does not require care 24/7. At night times when there isn't a night nurse, the family sleeps and has a baby monitor. Entitled mother at first was hoping that I would work for free. Mind you, this child wakes up at 3 or 4 in the morning. My thought was to work the 2 days for her for $100, that would be $5 an hour. I thought that was reasonable. I sent her the offer and she said, well, you will be sleeping most of the time, so we can only offer you $50. That would be $2.50 to give medications and feeding through the feeding tube and playing with a child. They were looking to hire a nurse for $2.50 for 20 hours of work. Edit, so I'm not working the nights. She had the agency staff one day and her mom another. I offered so low because I thought I was friends with the family. The average US hourly wage is $16.36. They want to pay you less than a third of that. They're offering you a sixth of what the average night nurse makes at $27 an hour. If they hired a 12-year-old to babysit a kid without disabilities, they'd be expected to pay at least $10 to $15. $5 an hour for what they're looking for is ridiculous. The kind of care they want will run them $40 to $60 an hour in most places in the US, more in some places. In addition, you'd be taking on a huge liability if something were to happen to the kid. I'm sure there are visiting nurse services in your area. Point them towards one of them. It'll run them several $1,000s, but that's the hand they've been dealt. Mother is being totally unreasonable. I pay more than that when I take my dogs to the pet resort for overnight boarding, and my dogs don't require special care. Sad that I value my pet's care and well-being more than this woman values the care and well-being of her special needs child. Unbelievable. Wow, what a terrible person, let alone mother. $100 for 2 overnights is extremely reasonable. When you consider all the things that could go wrong with a child who has all these needs, imagine paying a nurse $50 for 2 nights of work thinking you're being fair. WTF? Don't watch the kid OP,